And we're back to the Python Institute, this time lab number 3.1.4.6, basics of lists. And it's, as we can see here, this one should be very easy. Assuming you followed along previously to this lab and you went through and you learned about lists, they're actually pretty easy to work with. Basically, well, let's walk through here and see what the objectives in the scenario is. So the objectives use basic instructions related to lists and then create and modify those lists. So what we have here is a scenario. It says once there was a hat. The hat contained no rabbit, but a list of 5 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Your task is to write code that prompts the user to replace the middle number in the list with an integer number entered by the user. And then write a line of code that removes the last element from the list. And then lastly, write a line of code that prints the length of the existing list. And that's about it. So a couple of things we need to know, pay attention to here. Let's see. First off, it says that this needs to be an integer number. So we need to prompt the user for a integer. And we can go ahead and just type that in here. We know how to do that at this point. So let's go ahead and create a variable. Let's call it hat replace. That sounds like a nice variable. And then we want this to be an integer, and we want to input from the end user, and we want to ask them what number should be in the middle. So hopefully that's fairly familiar, and that's not really catching us off guard at this point. So we should be able to say, okay, what number do you want in the middle that is confirmed to be an integer and then assigned to the variable hat list. So that prompts the user, and then now we need to actually assign that to the middle number in the list. And so that's step number 2, right? Step number 1? Yeah. Okay, so we've got the number, and now we need to go ahead and assign that. And basically, the way a list works is that these are all considered part of an array or a group of numbers. Here, first number, second number, third number, fourth number, and fifth number, except they start counting at 0. So this is not actually the first number. This is the 0th number. And then this is the first number, and the second number, and the third one, and the fourth one. Trust me, if you're not, actually, let's try that out. So for instance, if I simply print hat list and then square brackets 0, and let me comment out this hat list right here. What we'll do is we'll actually see that it will print out the very first item in the hat list, which is the number 1. And then if I do hat list 1, then it will print out the second one, which is number 2. So they're all 0-based lists. So if I want the middle one, I don't choose 1, 2, 3. For the third location, I choose 0, 1, 2 for that right there. And so that should report back 3, the one that we want to replace with our input. So I will remove that comment right there. So that's how we refer to these individual items in the list, is with square brackets and then a number to identify their location in the list. Well, how do we then replace them? Well, at this point, we can pretty much treat this right here, this hat list square bracket 2, as a variable. And in fact, I can not only just read from it or print it, like we just saw there, I can also assign to it. So I can simply come in here and type in hat list square bracket 2 equals hat replace. And so now, if I comment that out and now we run it, it will prompt us for an input number. And if I type in 7 and hit enter, try that again, 7 and enter, then we can see the middle number got changed to a 7, instead of the 3. All right, step number 2, write a line of code that removes the last element from the list. All right, so we used the brackets to be able to refer to this guy as essentially a variable, so we can do the same thing in order to remove a variable. Specifically, in order to remove the variable, we use the del command, del, and then hat list, and whichever object we want to delete. Let's see, so since this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, del hat list 4 should delete the very last one. And if we run this script just to try, try that one more time here. There we go. So we replaced the third number with the 9 and then removed the last one. Now, in this situation, this worked fairly well because I knew exactly how many items were in hat list. There were 5 items, and therefore number 4 would have been the very last one. However, now I don't have 5 items. Now I only have 4 items. And so always specifying exactly which number I want like that is not always the best option. Probably the better option is to somehow refer to the very last item in the array, whether it's, in the list, whether it's a list of 2 items or a list of 1,000 items. There is a way to be able to specify the very last item in the list, and that is by putting in a -1. -1 means count backwards, and since we're always counting from the beginning, right up here at 0, well, -1 is going to be that guy. And -2 would be that guy. So negatives count the same way as positives do. They just count backwards. So -1 is always going to be the very last item in the list. All right, and then lastly, write code that prints the length of the hat list. Piece of cake. What we do is we just add in a print, and we'll go ahead and say new list length. And in order to identify the length of a hat list, there is another keyword that we can use called len. L-E-N stands for length, and then parentheses, and we type in hat list. And so now if we run this and we type in a new number such as 6, then it goes ahead and it changes. Maybe. It changes it, and why is it not finishing here? Try that one more time. There we go. New list length is 4, and it spits out the array length for me. So there you go. A couple of new commands, as well as our first option of working with a list. So we can use the list objects, the individual list items, as if they're arrays, simply using hat list 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. We can use the del command and use -1 to specify the very last item, or -2 to specify the second to the last item. And then the len function, which helps identify the length of whatever object is being presented to it.